tell me something, what technique of storytelling hasn't been done with the kaiju genre yet? There's animation, stop motion, CGI, and of course suitmation as fans like to call it, which had become the definitive way to make a kaiju movie for the longest time. It even still gets used today in some places. But what about with puppets? Now, yeah, stop motion armatures I guess you could say are like puppets, and of course there's the web series Gadziban, which features all the characters as such, but the movie Land of Fog, or Howl from Beyond the Fog as we call it, takes that concept into a new approach. Because instead of the monster being a puppet, the whole cast is instead, creating this very unique world that the genre hasn't really seen at all. The movie was written and directed by Daisuke Sato, who's no stranger to working on kaiju films, as he was an assistant production modeler on a handful of early 2000s movies, such as Giant Monsters All Out Attack and Gamera the Brave. Shortly after, he did a short film back in 2007 called The Foghorn, a story about a sea creature heading towards a lighthouse because it thinks the sound of the foghorn is another one of its kind calling out to it. The story was obviously based on the Ray Bradbury story, The Foghorn. Not only does it share the same title, but it's also the same exact concept. The short is now considered lost, supposedly due to a hard drive crash, so some stills are all that exist of the work now. About a decade later, Sato took the idea of his short and wanted to expand upon it, taking the concept and giving it a more fresher approach. The original idea was to make both the cast and the monster be puppets, giving it a very unique twist on giant monster movies, though test shots of the puppet creature looked unconvincing, so it was ultimately decided to bring the monster to life by way of a guy in a suit. I guess to quote the great Chucky,
"A true classic never goes out of style."
Now to help out with that aspect, they got iconic suit maker Keizo Murase to help aid them. Murase had done work in creating various monster suits throughout the many years, helping to create creatures such as Varan, the 1962 Kong, King Ghidorah, and many more, even outside of Toho. Now Murase wasn't going to come cheap, so to help fund his assistance, a Kickstarter for the film was created, which in the end got 140 backers, who pledged over 1 million yen, which is roughly about 11,000 US dollars. The backers also got some sweet prizes for helping aid the film, such as early home copies of the movie, a making of book which I really wish I had, and even an invite to the premiere and after party, though you had to live in Japan for that one. Don't think they were planning on paying for plane tickets and hotel rooms for that one. Okay, so how is the movie anyway? Did the backers get what they hoped for? Or is this just another Mighty No. 9 incident? Well, let's dive in to find out. Please consider both liking and subscribing, it really helps. It's the Meiji era of Japan, and we're introduced to a young man named Eiji, who is on his way to live with his mother in Kyushu, who is the only family member he has left. Arriving there, he encounters a blind girl named Takiri, who he finds out is his cousin. One night he catches her walking by herself to the lake where she encounters a giant creature called Nebula, who apparently is also blind. Now the kaiju is never actually called Nebula in the movie. It's never really called anything but a monster by the antagonist. The name Nebula, however, is mentioned on the Kickstarter and even on the back of the home video releases. The reason why it's most likely called that is because the word nebula is Latin for fog or type of mist. A little on the nose, but it works. One night when Takiri is properly introducing Eiji to Nebula, they are spied on by a man in the shadows, who sneaks off to tell the rest of his buddies about what he saw. This creepy character is part of a group of businessmen who are trying to buy the last bit of land by the lake, to work on some type of construction. But Eiji's mother always refuses them on that, most likely because she knows about Nebula's existence up there. Anyway, the men kidnap the two, try and kill Takiri, Nebula shows up and saves her, and then tries to fight off the men, which the rest of the film now becomes kaiju action, at least as actiony as it can get. Howl from Beyond the Fog delivers a great take in reinventing a genre, without trying to be goofy about it. Most kaiju movies that still use practical effects and suits nowadays tend to more or less make fun of the genre rather than celebrating it. Now I'm not saying I don't like that stuff, but it's kinda sad to see the art of suitmation reduced to almost that of a joke. This is the first movie in a while that still uses that technique while playing it straight. It also gives the monster suit a nice realistic look to it. It has this organic feel to it with the moss and branches sticking out of its body, almost as if it is part of the lake coming to life. The close-up shots were done with the hand puppet and they look fantastic, especially with that incredibly eerie roar the creature shouts out. The roar is simply a foghorn that you'd hear commonly at a lighthouse, which is possibly a little homage to the director's short film from 2007. And it's also possibly that's also what the creature sounded like in that movie. Now I can praise this beast all day, it really is one of the best original kaiju to come out in a long time. But in the film itself, there are some negative aspects I do need to address. Now getting Marseille to step back in the world of kaiju was great, but truth be told the man really hadn't worked on this stuff since Godzilla vs. Mothra back in 1992. Marseille still does have the hands for the art, but you can tell he's easily on the rusty side here. Nebula's movements in the movie that aren't done with a hand puppet are very stiff. They work okay in some parts, especially with the fog masking the creature's motions, but some parts, especially the clear day shot, look pretty bad. I mentioned before the first attempt at bringing the monster to life was to be done with a puppet, to keep it in line with the rest of the world's cast. But that was changed because the crew felt it looked unconvincing. I can't help but find that funny to think when they believe a shot like this is any better. One of the problems I can see is that the neck is just too bulky. I get why it's like that, but because of that, anytime the creature moves, its head wobbles a bit, and it looks unnatural. Personally, I think they should have thinned out the neck and have the head be wire operated to give it some more life, similar to the Ghidorah heads, just less sporadic. Now I'm not saying my way is the right way, I'm only suggesting it. Effects wise for everything else is nice. It is an independent film, so I'm going to be easy on it here. I will say I would have loved to have seen more of the world though. Especially when the opening teases us with a little bridge and train, and also showing characters interacting with these things. Most of the setting takes place at either Eiji's place or in forest-like environments. We do get to see a bit of the town, but it's very brief. Eiji as a character is... I really don't know. I'd say he's a by-the-books protagonist, but he's somehow not even that. The character simply exists to be our guide to the world, and to be someone to interact with Takagi. Speaking of, Takagi is by far the most intriguing character of the movie, and it's no surprise that more time would be put into her, considering she was part of the story from the very beginning. Because of her blindness, she feels she has no place in this world, or even a reason to live. But because she has a connection to the creature who is also blind, she gets the motivation to want to keep her life, whatever path her future leads her down. The same could possibly be said to Nebula, who, despite sharing the same illness, does always seem to know where Takagi is, giving them some type of strong bond. The only other characters worth mentioning are the antagonists, evil businessmen who are bad because they're evil businessmen. They don't really have a real connection to our leads, as far as we know, and only exist to give this film some type of bad guys to take down in the final act. But that's fine though. Despite my criticisms, I am forgiving to the film because I know it's an independent film that was brought to life thanks to a Kickstarter. I'm not going into this expecting a Spielberg-style screenplay here. It's a small love letter to kaiju fans made by fans. It got Marseille back into working on kaiju, and something about it must have sparked something in him, because shortly after he went on to direct his own kaiju short film, Brush of the Gods, set to release in 2022. He even brings along Sato as the cinematographer. Overall, I suggest you watch Howl from Beyond the Fog. It's definitely worth checking out. And how with a runtime of only 34 minutes, it's not eating up much of your time at all. You can find the DVD relatively cheap online, and for the hardcore collectors out there, there's a limited edition Blu-ray release as well. Though be aware that these do have some shoddy translations for the subtitles. Just watch Eiji's mother's final scene to fully get what I mean by that. Anyways, thanks for watching towards the end of the video everyone, and I'll see you next time.
OK ブルマークの怪獣バッテンガー